Be it resolved that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is better than classical Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. Haha, I win. Alright, so my friend Alex Kask, longtime veteran of Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, also dabbles in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so you're conversant with that field as well. So what did you just do?
So what we were looking at was what would be described as a typical urawaza. So we have a primary technique, the armbar in this case. We might refer to it as a teizaru. That armbar technique, there's various counters, of course. There's like reversals, escapes, and that sort of thing. This was an armed reversal. Right. So basically, you're put in the lock, and then once the lock is there, if you have an improvised weapon you can access, that's your first line of defense.
Okay. So now we were talking earlier of how some of the Japanese Jiu-Jitsu applications are a little bit different from what we see in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Can you give me an example of how you would do classical Japanese armbar to deal with that?
Sure. So if I, for example, if you had the weapon in your belt here, what would be happening is we'd be still doing the armbar in the typical fashion. So maybe if we just reverse this, it might be easier to see. So we would be still doing the armbar. However, in this case, what we would actually do is use the second leg here in order to block off that arm before we actually apply the armbar here.
Okay.
And
so if you've got your legs crossed like that, it's much harder for me to draw that second weapon.
Exactly. It's this left foot here that's trying to provide, to deny you the access in that manner. So then you're still doing the arm lock as you would, except what you're having to do here is consider the role of this second hand. That way there. So you get your tap, and then there's a todome, which would be the finishing blow here. So this would be the use of this bony portion right here, hitting a vital point called uto right here.
Okay. Now, I've seen a very similar technique to this. On your back, please, Alex.
Sure.
And it's funny how everything old is new again. Okay. So we're here, and you're either gripping your wrists or just your fingers, doesn't really matter. And if I feed my feet in like this, I'm making that X, and that gives me the purchase to extend the arm. So that's exactly the same finish, just applied in a different situation to deal with the grip break versus preventing someone from getting to a neck.
Exactly. So yeah, very much what might be applied in a classical sense for one purpose in a modern context may have a very useful alternative application.
Would you say that awareness of weaponry is one of the big distinguishing factors, being classical and modern jiu-jitsu?
I believe so, yeah. I mean, it'll depend on the school, I think, but certainly the classical arts, as I've learned them, are very fixated on the idea of being open to the possibility that your opponent is armed, and that your opponent usually is not acting as a solo fighter. That
it's not a one-on-one consensual fight.
No, they're always assuming that there's going to be another combatant coming at you immediately afterwards. So, for example, you finish the technique, there's the ki, but you then pull back, and usually at that point you're engaging in a form of situational awareness. Usually it's referred to as zanshin, but the idea is that you're being very actively aware of your surroundings and trying to figure out, okay, well, is this person still in the fight? Who's coming next? Who else do I need to assist here? Is there an escape point? All these sorts of very fundamental tactical questions are things that you're going through in your mind with every single technique you're doing. So if there is one demarker, I think, for the classical arts that could be beneficial to all other martial artists, it would be that sort of situational awareness of saying, well, every technique that you do, you take a moment just to ponder your circumstances and that you're aware of, for example, the topography, where improvised weaponry might be, where escape points might be, what other people are doing.
Mm-hmm.
Having that sort of awareness, I think, was really vital.
And how would you train that? If you and I are just doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and we're just, hey, come on, my friend, let's roll today. I want to work, my inverted guard or whatever.
Sure.
How can we bring that awareness to that training? I think you get a little bit of it just being aware of the people rolling around you, so you don't put your foot in their face. I think that translates a little bit, but it's not.
That's a good starting point, certainly. I think the other point, and when I teach my students, what I do is I actually have them engage in a certain exercise where I say, well, randomly assign people in class that are engaged in the same technique that you're training in right now. Figure out which ones are going to be the people that you will say are your friends and which ones are not. And try and keep track of that. And every time you finish a technique, I want you to take a snapshot of the room and figure out who's where, and I want you to do a quick tactical analysis. And once you've done that, at the end of the technique, that's when you'll pull back and now you'll grip on and start the next technique.
Okay.
But you do that and you try to get them to actively engage in that exercise. And at first it seems kind of weird trying to get your mind around that, but after a while with the magic of neuroplasticity, it becomes second nature, and you start realizing that you're doing it in non-martial contexts as well, and that's where it gets interesting.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Alex.
Great, thank you.